Good morning, and here is the answer video for the second wave of immigration. And again, this one is going to cover from 1820 to 1880. A little later on, I will show you some charts to show the speed of immigration, but you'll see that wave 2 is going to be quite a bit faster than wave 1, quite a bit more immigrants coming in. Wave 3 is actually going to be the peak, where it's going to be even more. But from 1820 to 1880 was a period of a lot of people coming to the United States. Okay, so starting out with pull factors in the second wave. So when we talk about pull factors, those are things that attracted people to the United States. So there were a couple of big ones. First of all, obviously, we'll call it over and over, this economic opportunities. Jobs and land. Now, there were two specific things I want to mention here. One was the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. So they built a railroad all the way across the country, and that required a ton of workers. And they started on both ends of the country. They started about at the Mississippi River and on the California coast. It was actually from the group building from the Mississippi west had huge numbers of people that were immigrants from Europe. Ireland was a big one, and lots of other immigrants as well. From the western coast, we have a new coming group of immigrants, which we'll talk about later, the Chinese. And the Chinese were a huge part of the success of the Transcontinental Railroad, incredibly hardworking, very well organized and efficient, and they knew how to use explosive powder, which the knowledge of that allowed them to be much better tunnel builders, which was needed building through the mountains of the West. So the Transcontinental Railroad was a huge part of bringing people here. Then we also had something called the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act offered free land to people willing to turn it into a farm. Now, this had gone on a couple of different times, but this process of giving people these homesteads is a huge part of how Wisconsin was settled. If you look at Wisconsin became a state in 1848, so a lot of Wisconsin's settlement was done by second wave immigrants. And I think you'll see that when we talk about where immigrants came from during this time. I think you're going to see a lot of those influences here in Wisconsin. All right. So those were two big pull factors. Of course, you have the regular pull factors that are always in effect. Freedoms, opportunities, freedom of religion, and so on. But most people in this time were moving here for better life opportunities. Push factors. What drove people out of their country? Well, probably the number one incident during this time was the potato famine in Ireland. The Irish lived barely already, and they lived on a diet heavy in potatoes. And when a disease came that rotted large numbers of the potatoes, it made many Irish have a choice. You're either going to stay in Ireland and die, or you're going to travel to the United States. And Ireland had about 9 million people before the famine, but they had about 5 million of those people. 2.5 million left, and 2.5 million died. And the population of Ireland today still hasn't recovered. It's still in about the 4 to 5 million area. But that was a huge push factor. You also had just a lack of land available in Europe. As Europe's population grew, as more and more people tried to live on less and less land, it became impossible to survive as a farmer. And so people started to, if you were a farmer and you knew in the United States they were giving away farmland, it became that was a powerful push and pull kind of working together. The push being that land wasn't there, the pull being that land in America was available. So those are two push factors that were huge during that time. There are, of course, other ones available. There were some unfair governments as well, where people were trying to free from being not treated well by their governments. The top two countries of immigrants that arrived in this period were the German and the Irish. This was the peak of German immigration. You're going to see Germans coming during the first wave. A lot of them during the second wave. You're going to continue to see German immigration in the third wave, but obviously that was a huge one for this time period. All right. So those were the two biggest ones, and I also misspelled the word arrived here. We're from Germany and Ireland. And again, if you think about in Wisconsin, a large number of people who came during this time ended up in Wisconsin. So you see the heavy German presence throughout Wisconsin, and especially throughout the area we live in, even today. You will find many Irish immigrants often stayed more in the cities of the East, but some did come out to the farms. You also have during this time a number of people from, whether it was Sweden, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, the Dutch people, all people coming from those areas. And you'll see pockets of them around Wisconsin. You'll see many towns with names, like there's a town in Wisconsin named Belgium and New London, and numerous other towns named after places in Europe. So, up to this time, most immigrants were from Europe, but what Asian country did many start arriving in San Francisco? The Chinese. And the Chinese are going to really be their own chapter in immigration because of the fact, if you could think back to in wave one, the rule was originally that you had to be white, and obviously Chinese didn't fit that European description. But again, they were welcomed in for all of the help they provided during the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. And I also forgot another big pull, a really big pull, was the California Gold Rush. Sorry, I forgot that one. The California Gold Rush also employed many Chinese. Chinese men were willing to do work that European men saw as women's work. So many Chinese men ran successful laundries and restaurants, and they served the Gold Rush miners. All right. Okay, back down to number 5. Immigration laws. During this time, immigration was fairly open for the most part. But there was a group of people in the 1850s who tried, it was a political party called the Know Nothings, tried to stop immigration. And just as it is today, pretty much from this period forward, you're going to see this as an issue that people are divided on. During the 1850s and 1860s, there were beginning to be movements of people to say, we don't want any more new people. We don't want any people that are different than us. While others are going to point out that the immigrants help out with many things in our economy, and that so many of us ourselves were immigrants at one time. And like I said, it's very similar to an argument you hear on TV on a daily basis nowadays is who should be allowed to come into our country and from where and how many is something that politicians and people really still can't agree on. Now, during this time, the Know Nothing Party never was able to win an election, so immigration continued to be allowed. But the fact that you have, especially these very, very poor Irish that were arriving, very rough shape, that's what turned some people to be more anti-immigrant and anti-Catholic, because prior to the Irish coming, most of the people who came to the U.S. were Protestant. So that's going to change things a little bit. All right, that is the end of Wave 2.